person to person. So you can say, well, couldn't you do that telepathically? Yes, you can, but there's a factor of error there. Whereas if it can be done scientifically and precisely, then you develop that capability, which is what they have. But it also means they have those technologies that cross over into the propulsion system, teleportation systems, materialization, dematerialization, etc. These were all the things that began to be drilled down on hard between the early 20th century and today. So about 100 years of classified research. We're going to get into this. Therefore, if it sounds confusing to you, it's only because you have to stop for a moment and think, what is within me? I have a physical body, I'm in this physical room, on a physical planet, going around a physical star, but I also have within me my body of light, the essence of my reality, the causation, thought being, the tone within yourself. There is actually a resonant tone, like a mantra, but it's unique to everything in creation. That is like a standing wave that manifests, and it's called the thought, the sound component of thought. That's what a mantra is. And then deep within us is this transcendent level of consciousness. And we're all part and parcel of that field. And that's why there is no separation in space and time once you understand that every point in space and time and all matter. This is where entanglement theory and what Einstein called the spooky effect, where he observed that something in one place was affecting another place instantaneously, and spooky. But that's what non-locality physics is, right? You've all heard of non-locality. This is the ultimate non-locality, is this state of transcendent consciousness, which, FYI, is folded within every single one of you. What the samadhi state is what you sit and you meditate and you enter into that. And sometimes you get it clearly, sometimes you don't, but that's what the meditative process can lead to. And some people call that awakening or enlightenment or what have you. It's really the ordinary state of consciousness. You are always that, whether you recognize it or not. That's the beauty of this. Now, your individual ego may not recognize it or even understand it, but then phenomena happen, like intuition, precognition, lucid dreams, etc. and so on. And miraculous things, where you hear about people who suddenly are able to pick up or almost levitate a car off a child, way beyond what any human strength should be able to do when they need to, because they put their intention on it. See what I'm saying? So we all have that within us. Every single one of us, but also every single extraterrestrial being. Just remember that as we go through this. Now, that capability can be exploited for the good, the common good, for enlightenment, for healing, free energy, all kinds of things. Or it can be used as a weapon system. So I'm not trying to scare the hell out of you, but by the end of this, you will be. And but don't be. But you probably will be. But I'm going to tell you at the end why you shouldn't be. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And this is a little more of a deep dive into what we call alien. And the reason I want to call this out for what it is, I mentioned it a moment ago, there are all kinds of phenomena being called alien. And I've met with people who've had encounters with, like a poltergeist. You know what a poltergeist is? Somebody who's passed away and comes in and is, moves something around. They say, "Oh, it was an alien in my house." Well, it was no such thing. It was not an extraterrestrial biological life form from another planetary system. It was someone who lived in that house 200 years ago and is pissed off that he died somehow, unfortunately. I tell a great classic story of this. And so this gets into, this sort of experience where, they're in another dimension. They're not in the physical body anymore. The ancestral spirits, poltergeists, astral dimensions, there can be lower and higher frequency, all the way to angelic and celestial. But I was in the emergency department once. I don't know if you've heard this story, but it's illustrative. And it finally was quiet for 1 nanosecond. But previously, a man had died in one of the trauma rooms, and it was a violent death, murder, and he was intoxicated, and he was not a happy camper. And about 3 or 4 in the morning, in the room in which he passed away, now the whole emergency department's empty. Now I'm sitting there with the nurses and the secretary, and we're just sort of hanging out till the next case comes in. Suddenly, the EKG machine turns on, the cabinet's open, the IV bags start being thrown out of the cabinet, and the IV pole, the beep, beep, drip, all that turns on. And the whole thing is like a whirlwind goes in this one little room, and it's this guy pissed off. He's really mad. I did a little prayer where I connected him to the most great light that's within all things and us, and sent him on his way, and he stopped. And the nurse said, "What did you do?" I said, "Well, I just kind of connected him to where he needs to go." But this sort of thing, almost all critical care medical people have a story like this. And in the emergency department, it's a lot of it. Now, that wasn't an alien. That was a guy who just had been murdered, who was very intoxicated and who was furious, and came in and was able with his spirit body to push into this dimension a little bit. And that's what poltergeist is. Like the movie Ghost with Demi Moore. Have you ever seen it? So, and that phenomenon is absolutely real. Now, a lot of people have had experiences with beings from other dimensions that are not extraterrestrial that can have that effect in this plane, and they will think it's an ET, and it isn't. It's really important for you to get this. So what is being called alien and what has been kind of thrown all together into one category are actually extraterrestrial, and these are the ones that are transdimensional interstellars. I call them TDIS. These are ETs capable of interstellar travel using these advanced transdimensional technologies where they go from one point in space-time to another, but not in a linear way. They're dropping out of linear space-time and traversing these dimensions, which means that they're not limited by the normal limitations on matter and space and time. Because otherwise, there'd be no way they could go from another star system. That's how they're doing it. But there are also ETs that people can have experiences with that are planetary bound. Let's say that, I doubt anyone in this room travels around the different galaxies, maybe, I don't know, but unlikely. But in consciousness, you could go to another planet, and you could actually visit an ET civilization, and you may see one that is at our stage of development or even perhaps more primitive. And that is through the field of consciousness and the ability to remote view and teleport using this subtle body. So people have had experiences with both interstellar transdimensional ETs that are passing through other dimensions, that are from other star systems and planets, but also ones that can be remote viewed or seen or experienced in consciousness. And some of those civilizations could also get here and visit, but without a spacecraft. They don't have that technology yet. Just like the Aboriginals had dream time as a routine way that they used in Australia. I know that story. And that's how they would know what to do the next day. They'd meet a friend in the outback, and they'd know where to intersect at some remote area because they did it during their dream. Well, you could do that. If you can do it 10 miles away, you can do it a billion light years because you've transcended space-time limitations. Does this make sense yet? All right. I mean, it's very abstract ideas, but I'm trying to relate them to personal experiences that all of you have had, I'm sure. So now you're talking about civilizations that have, the ones that are interstellar, have very advanced artificial intelligence. What I mean by that, their spacecraft are bio-nano. Every special operations force guy I've dealt with has come up across one of these objects that we have downed using electromagnetic weapons we'll get to in a moment, since the 40s. That's what Roswell was. Will tell you that the craft themselves were living, and the craft themselves were conscious. They were conscious to the point that AI, the artificial intelligence associated with the spacecraft, was at the level that the craft emanated the consciousness of the pilot. And the craft itself has a living, organic quality to it, even though it's a machine. So it's a bio-nano machine that's conscious. That's very different from the clunky things Lockheed Martin's making. I'm giving you a little hint here of how you can tell the difference between a covert military UFO and an actual ET spacecraft, interstellar, transdimensional. Zing, got it? A little teachable moment there when you go out on the stars and you're watching. So those spacecraft that are interstellar have this ability to emanate the consciousness of the occupants. And they actually have their function and movement according to the thought. Now, often they're touching a panel and thinking, and then the craft will go here or there or what have you, or materialize or dematerialize. Very, very advanced stuff. Not your 777, Boeing 777. Now, so these, so the craft are interfacing with the beings, but then their communication systems are there are two ways that this is happening. There's technology that is assisting their consciousness. So let's say they want to see another star system on a planet called Earth, and they may be 1 billion light years from here. They can connect to that, and it is an augmentation system, a magnification system that is electromagnetic, but very advanced, that enables them to see using consciousness. So the technology is assisting the remote viewing function that is innately within all sentient beings. Does this make sense? But there's the reverse, and that's the consciousness-assisted technology. So there are technologies on board, all the technologies on board these ET craft can also be interfacing with the consciousness and thought, in coherent thought, not random, but very directed, coherent, intent thought of the ETs on board. How many people have had a fairly close encounter and seen a craft and felt that it was awake? Felt that the craft itself was awake? Yeah, they are, but they're awake. They're actually just an extension of the consciousness of the occupants. I know, this gets into some weird stuff fast in the first 35 minutes, but we're gonna get to a lot weirder stuff pretty fast. So the very high level ETs, their consciousness would be similar to these. So the civilizations that have been around 10 to the 7th, 10 to the 8th, 10 to the 9th years, millions to 1 billion years longer than we have, both their technologies and their consciousness would be at the celestial / angelic level, but they still have planetary systems, star systems, physical worlds. But everyone on that planet, even at the time of birth, is born into a state of cosmic consciousness and enlightenment at the time of birth. Eventually humans will evolve into one of those level 12 civilizations. We're a level 0, by the way. Michikaku makes this thing, we have to get to level 1, which means you're peaceful, not destroying your environment, and not killing each other. But we ain't got there yet, all right? We're trying to, right? That's what we're working towards. Well, some of us. Most people, 90+%. So that's another thing to remember. In our CE5 expeditions, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, we'll be out, we'll be having an experience where the experience with an ET civilization will be very similar to an experience with one of the higher angelic celestial, but they're not, and they have spacecraft. I loved it when Monsignor Balducci, the senior theologian at the the Vatican that Paula Harris, who couldn't be with us today, she's in Europe, introduced me to. And he was, he was a senior theologian to Pope John Paul, and he said to me, angels and demons don't need flying saucers. Simple statement, true statement. Think about it. We had a wonderful discussion, and his testimony is in the disclosure material as well as the senior astronomer for the Vatican Observatory and Project. Most people haven't read it. It's there, and they confirm all of this. But my point is, the civilizations that are extraordinarily advanced are going to really look like magic. Now, I have to point out to people, let's take a step back to all the, sort of time-centered, reductionist scientific people on the planet listening to this. This cell phone, if you went back in time and handed this to Thomas Jefferson, or worse, to Salem, Massachusetts, you would be considered a warlock, a witch, something. I mean, to have something and be showing a video on this from another part of the world, everything we're using today would look like magic to someone only 200 years ago. Now let's extrapolate our technological development that we know about in the non-classified world. The world of CNN and the New York Times, i.e. lame. They don't know anything, and they're not going to know anything. So, to quote Spook, the first time I was going to brief the CIA director, he says, the president and the CIA director don't know anything, and they're not going to know anything. That's how he worded it, like a nasty piece of work. Anyway, so this is something for you to think about, is that if we're talking about civilizations that are in the thousands to millions of years more developed than we are, extrapolate how we've developed since, say, the early 1800s, now, 200 years. And factor in that about 100 years of that period, the big breakthroughs in science, technology, energy, propulsion, anti-gravity, even consciousness technologies have been suppressed, sequestered into unacknowledged special access projects. Now extrapolate a few thousand years forward. That's who and what we're dealing with. One civilization we had contact with at Joshua Tree, the senior ambassador named Zhu, that we took a photo of, some of you have seen it. And when I was asking him, what his IQ was, we had a series of electromagnetic devices that we were using for binary yes-no confirming communication with the civilization. I said, my sense is that your IQ is around 450. And it signaled yes. And so, most Americans, average American, 110, 15. And it's an algorithmic scale. So you're dealing with civilizations that are very, very advanced, incredibly intelligent, highly conscious. And we have to figure their technologies are going to be a correlate. They're going to parallel that development. Now the good news is we're also developing that way. They've done studies with meditators. People who meditate actually have their IQs and everything go up. Everyone's told that you're stuck with what you're born with. Not true. Not true. They actually can go up as you develop higher states of consciousness. We'll get into this and this another subject. But so imagine civilizations that have been involved with conscious evolution with technological correlates for thousands to millions of years longer than we have. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. So this phenomenon of interdimensional weirdness often gets lumped into this experience with actual entities. And then you get into the mother of all clusterfucks, as the Marines call it. And it's, excuse my French, but the French would be, mon Dieu, that's not French. But this, where you're dealing with classified, unacknowledged special access projects that have the ability and have had the ability since the 50s and 60s to simulate, like a simulator, alien experiences. And just a short list of those would be things that look like UFOs that are and then termed ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles. These were first being worked on in the 40s and 50s. I have a gentleman that I've been meeting with whose father is a member of the Majority Intelligence Committee, MAGIC, and senior U.S. Senator, former senior U.S. Senator. And, you know, he was talking about the fact that his grandfather, Paul Mellon, had gone over to Germany at the end of World War II and retrieved the secret weapon that Hitler was working on. That was a disc. And it was and they also had a bell that was electromagnetic fit, sort of anti-gravity. They hadn't worked out the bugs. They couldn't really control. They would wobble, crash. They hadn't got it perfected. We got the atomic bomb before they perfected the anti-gravity devices. However, Paul Mellon, who along with Alan Dulles and a few other people were key to founding the CIA, went over with George Patton, General Patton, and brought it back to the United States along with the top Nazi scientists under Operation Paperclip. And that the mainstream history books have been written about Operation Paperclip. This is not a conspiracy theory. And, you know, these were people like Herman Oberth and Werner von Braun and a lot of other really brilliant scientists who had worked on these sort of technologies, brought them in, and they became the foundation of our not only intelligence community, but our early aerospace research and development community in the United States, which my uncle, who worked on the lunar module, was involved with Northrop Grumman, but they were, you know, a generation before him even in the 40s. So an interesting side note, George Patton wanted to disclose these technologies to the public for the good of humanity. He was assassinated by the Wetworks team. Wetworks were assassinated because he wanted to do so. And the result is, during the Eisenhower years, the projects that were dealing with this area of research, both extraterrestrial and man-made, came together in these unacknowledged special access projects, although they were run in separate compartments. So let me explain what I mean here. And you had all the way back to the 20s, T. Townsend Brown, working with very high voltage frequency systems where in crystalline materials where he would have objects levitate, right? This is a matter of public record. And his work then got pulled into the RAND Corporation, but in the Air Force, later the Air Force. But there were also experiments going on in Germany, the Claus-Frost experiment, and some others in the late 20s. So by the time the 40s came around, there had been a lot of experimentation with VHV, I call it, very high voltage systems that at certain cycles per second, let's call it hertz, resonant fields, combined resonant fields with specialized materials, crystalline materials and what have you, would result in a lifter effect, anti-gravity effect, mass cancellation. So those got developed between the 20s and the 40s. This is why I call the chapter in that book and in the movie, The Lost Century. There's a whole lost century of technology. We're running around with jet engines and cars running ExxonMobil gasoline unnecessarily for 100 years. And we're paying the price now for the environment and geopolitically. But keep in mind that these technologies were on the radar scope of classified projects long before the end of World War II. A man who lived here in Denver, some of you may have known Dr. Altshuler. How many people knew Dr. Altshuler? He was a hematologist, pathologist, wonderful man. He's passed away. His uncle was General Jimmy Doolittle, World War II. And all of you have heard of Foo Fighters, I presume. Well, not the band. So Dave Grohl named the band after this, what I'm about to tell you. Foo Fighters were these things that we called UFOs in World War II that were zipping around our aircraft and what have you. We thought it was a covert action, German technology. The Germans thought it was a covert allied U.S.-British technology. So FDR, Roosevelt, sent General Doolittle over to the theater of operations to look into this. And he looked into it and studied it and came back and told FDR, this was in the 40s, early mid-40s, and said, sir, those are interplanetary vehicles, quote unquote. So this goes back at least 70 some years and probably longer. The part that people forget is that the human mind and an extraterrestrial mind can discover the same laws of the universe. Those are laws of the universe are universal. Important point. Very important point. So there was this accelerating discovery of electromagnetic, trans-dimensional, and anti-gravity sciences in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s that then got potentiated greatly by the retrieval of extraterrestrial vehicles. The most notorious being the Roswell crash, which I'm sure you've all heard of. But that is by no means the only one, nor was it the first one. There were ones in the 30s and 40s. And those extraterrestrial technologies were then put into a compartmented operation, TSSCI, top secret, special compartmented information or intelligence, that was unacknowledged, to be studied. And then there were people doing at the same time work in the conventional anti-gravity, let's call it, electromagnetogravitics, is what it is properly called, anti-gravity and other systems. And there are very few that would communicate between the two. That was a highly specialized group of people that could cross between the conventional R&D labs that were classified and unacknowledged and the extraterrestrial research projects that were also unacknowledged, because compartmentalization is the name of the game of secrecy. A man who's recently surfaced and is working with me has been in, was cleared to 18 of these unacknowledged special access projects, or USACs, and he's providing me information about these 18 projects, and he was in them between 2002 and 2012. So it's a lot of current information. We'll get to that in a moment. Now, what I'm trying to portray here is something you need to know historically, because everyone will say, oh, we have these spacecraft that are ARVs at Lockheed Martin, in Northrop and Boeing and all these outfits that are in EG&G. Those are, people say, oh, those were all based on ET spacecraft. They were not. They're a combination of man-made breakthroughs in science and technology that were classified being pushed along by the study of extraterrestrial technology, which is a much heavier lift, much harder to do, because you're looking at something you have no clue what it can be used for. The other part of that's being developed and has been developed for some years is this area, programmed life forms. These are what people normally call aliens, the grays, the this, the that. I know men who've worked in those labs making these little creatures. They are kind of boogamy. They're sort of creepy, but they have integrated circuits in their sort of cortex, but they are also biological. So there's a genetic program that will take genetic material from a dead or living extraterrestrial, develop it, and then put in integrated circuits, and then create a sort of robotic creature that passes quite well as an alien. There's a man who's lived in the area named Stan Romanek, and Ricky Butterfast, who's here, and I went to go visit him a few years ago. And I'm sure all of you have seen this, heard about his experience with Boo and this ET that was popping up. But what you didn't see, because I think Disney bought up the rights to it, was some footage of one getting into his house when he had his camera running. And there were all these weird electromagnetic effects happening in his house. His medicine bottles, the plastic was melting, and all kinds of weird stuff. And he shows us this video, and I'm sitting there with Ricky and MUFON, state director, somebody who researches this issue with MUFON. And it shows this creature coming in, and it's very jerky, kind of moving. And then the camera falls over. They've thrown a chemical canister in. He passes out, has a classic abduction video. Now, to 99.99999999999% of the population, they've just had an encounter with an alien. Not, they had an encounter with an alien. Got to get your mind around it. Now, have people had real experiences with real ETs? Yes. But they get simulated. And someone who's had an actual experience with a real ET, sometimes to confuse them, will then be targeted with the PLF and ARB and a lot of other weird stuff we're going to get into. To confuse the memory and experience.
5-minute warning.
Counterintelligence programs are quite well developed in this area. Quite good. Very good at it. So I turned to Stan and the other people and I said, well, that's the PLF. And he said, what's that? I said, you cannot be doing UFO research and not know what a program like an ARB is. Since about 80% of the phenomena being reported is this, not this. This gets blacklisted. These get reported. Because the publishing houses, the big media, will be told, cover this, don't cover this. I told you it'd be a mindfuck. So, but, excuse me, third time I've used that word, sorry, but I think what you have to begin to understand is that it is, because, you know, in 1991, 92, 93, when I was first emerging into this area, I didn't think any of this could be possible. It is. And this is what they don't want you to know. They want you to be confused, and they want you to be played to support the alien invasion agenda, which is the big punchline of the secrecy. That's keeping the technology secret, so we have to burn oil and make people trillions of dollars that way. But you have to understand this. These are even more concerning. And this has been going on since at least the 50s that I know about, 1950s. So I'll give you a timeline. Anti-gravity, gravity control, October 1954 is when that was mastered. Programmed life forms were later in the 60s, 70s, 80s. In the 50s and 60s, they were using a lot of stagecraft with people made up to look like an ET. I've talked with some intelligence people who said, oh yeah, we take someone who is very short or very unusual looking and do a certain kind of makeup like in Hollywood and put them on board one of these ARVs and have them abduct somebody. Very effective. Stagecraft is called. The electromagnetic interdimensional portals are even a greater concern. Some of you have heard of these sort of events happening in places like Montauk and other facilities where, also at the Lockheed Skunk Works, and I remember meeting with the Skunk Works, very highly classified officers. Actually, it was a man who was introduced to me by the head of Lockheed International. And they had a laboratory where they could hook people up to an electromagnetic console, tap into these other dimensions, not ET, and bring into 3D an actual being from that dimension, and it'd be running around the lab like some kind of monster.
Venom spawned. Enemy has the protection.
Very advanced stuff in the hands of some very strange people with an agenda to deceive. Counterintelligence is all about deception. So then, have I lost you all yet? Just, we ain't got started yet, huh?
place. Vote now. begins in 3, 2, 1. Fight. Lead lost. За это заплатишь. Тебе просто повезло. Quad spawn. Enemy has the quad. Quad damage. Enemy has the quad. Party breaker. Enemy has the quad. Я все вижу. Я найду тебя. Enemy has the quad. Я сломаю тебя. Я тебя вижу. Понравилось? Incoming protection. Тебе не сгодится. Protection spawn. Enemy has the protection. Excellent. Quad spawned. Enemy has the quad. Enemy has the quad.
Еще раз. Я тебя вижу. Я сломаю тебя. Удачно будет. Ладно, бывает. Просто я лучший. Я все вижу.
Quad spawn. Quad damage. 5th place. has the quad. Lead lost.